All right, welcome back to Talking Fitchburg, and now it's time for the big show. It's Phil Dawson, Big 1070. Phil, how are you doing on this Monday morning?
Quite well, gents. How about you guys?
I am beat tired from staying up and watching the beloved Packers take a big loss.
We're trying to hold it together over here.
Yeah, so I don't know. I was telling Phil in the break that I was listening to a show this morning. He made me feel better about what happened last night.
That's good.
So he's like...
So you want me to try to repeat that here? Try to make everybody feel better?
You're like the counselor that I needed. That's all I'm saying.
Well, in terms of the reality of it is that it is just one game.
Right.
The reality of it is that you're not going against, you didn't lose to a division or even conference opponent. The other reality, we're just at the mid-season point. So it's good to find out where you need to be better at. And like what we had learned when the Packers ended up beating San Diego is that their secondary can be tested by a good quarterback. And we saw that with Philip Rivers, threw for over 500. Peyton Manning goes over 340. So the secondary needs work. And that's a good thing to know. When you know what your faults are, you can work to correct them. Offensively, it was a total disaster.
Yeah.
But the good news is, again, that you will likely not see that kind of defense the rest of the season. Next week's no walk in the park either. Carolina's very, very good, but they're not as strong in the secondary as Denver is. And that was Aaron Rodgers' worst game ever. So that's totally off the radar of what we've ever seen from him. So there's a lot of things that are just like, oh, okay, this, and this happened. So let's move on to the next one. This week's game, much more important for this Packer team to see and really gauge and try to hold where they are position-wise in the NFC, because the Minnesota Vikings are just a game behind them in their division. So this puts a lot of pressure on where the Packers are going to be following this next week's game, and then finishing the season, because you still have two more against the Vikings. So, it's huge. It's huge this week, but again, against the Broncos, national embarrassment night, no big deal for the Packers.
And Phil, I just picking on the offense here for a second. We're really noticing with having Jordy Nelson out. I mean, we're just being affected by that. Don't you agree?
Well, yeah, you'd imagine that would happen because he's an All-Pro, Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, but there has to be more to it than just Jordy Nelson, and I think last night was a real good example of that. Even if Jordy Nelson was there, they're not winning that game. He doesn't make that much of a difference from Aaron Rodgers. Even if Jordy Nelson had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, the Packers still lose that game.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just not a lot there for the Packers to try to figure out from a defense in the Broncos that's just really, really good. And they have players that no other team really has. They have 3 practical All-Pros, again, in their secondary, and can put pressure on Aaron Rodgers with just 4 down linemen. So it makes Aaron Rodgers have to do what we thought he does best, and that's pick apart defenses, find the open spots. And, with Devontae Adams back, there just isn't the same kind of rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
You're working, again, with other young wide receivers. Randall Cobb had catches but couldn't do anything after the catch, and that was something that these Packer wide receivers have, owned. They've been one of the top teams at yards after the catch, and against Denver, they just weren't able to do it. So it certainly was going to be a blow, but they're without him anyway, so they have to figure it out. Couldn't quite figure anything out last night.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to some positive news, and the Badgers and Corey Clements returning for 3 touchdowns. We're feeling pretty good in Badger Nation now.
Yeah, the Andy Baggett, who is with UWBadgers.com, describes, we've been talking about this team all year and how they've had to get the job done without any real explosive players, and picking up first downs and just small chunks of yardage and doing it in a workman-like fashion, and nothing sexy about the team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Corey Clement brings the sexy back. And we saw that on Saturday, that he is a dynamic player. He can rip off big chunks of yardage. He changes the game and the scope of what other teams now have to do. They know that if he's in the backfield, he can hit home runs. To use a baseball metaphor for football, he's a home run hitter, and that can come at any point in time. And so it's the weapon that they've been missing, and they should only get better because of that. As long as he can stay healthy, they should be in a pretty good spot by the end of the year. Whether or not they can catch Iowa remains an issue, but regardless of that fact, they could find themselves in a pretty good bowl game. And again, with Corey Clement, they have a much different looking offense that puts a lot more stress on the defenses that they'll be facing. So they're in a really good spot right now.
What a week that the changeover, though, that we were focused on the quarterbacks last week, and now then you have a win like this. I mean, it's just pretty exciting time in the Badgers offense world here.
Yeah, and what really has made this team and allowed them to get to the point where they're 7-2 is their defense, which is a nationally ranked team. Even in the game on Saturday, the only touchdown comes on a pick six. They don't even score a touchdown against this Badger defense, and that's happened in all three of the losses, or in the losses that they've had, the two losses they had against Iowa and against what we saw against Alabama. Now, again, they're a really good team, but even in the Purdue game, interceptions and turnovers, giving short fields to the other teams have been the only way that this team has given up touchdowns. So that's the super impressive part. They're going to be like this the rest of the year, again, if they can remain healthy. And maybe it's okay if they don't get to, I'd like to see them get to the Big Ten championship game, win the West, etc. But then you don't have to face an Ohio State who embarrassed you a year ago, right? And look like the best team in all of college football. So there might be a silver lining in all of this.
I agree. All right, real quick, Phil. We know you're an NBA fan. And what's happening with the Bucks?
Well, I think there's a bit. They're still, again, the youngest team in all of the league. They got Giannis Antetokounmpo back for the past two games, but their faults have. I think the faults we knew about this team going in have already been exposed and taken advantage of by other teams. You look at the last two games against Toronto and I think the Wizards on Saturday, and both of those teams in the fourth quarter, despite the Bucks having leads in those fourth quarters, or not against Toronto but against the Wizards, they started hitting threes. Right, and they hit 5 threes, 3 of them back-to-back possessions for the Wizards on Saturday, and the Bucks just don't have the firepower to contend with that, so they have to defend better. And once they get into a big hole, unlike some other teams that can find their way behind the arc and knock some shots down, they just don't have the capability to do that. So they've just been exposed in the ways that we already know those flaws, and so they got to figure out a way to overcome that. And hopefully with the return of Jabari Parker at some point, that will help in all of it. And again, being young, they may have bought into some of the things that, hey, we're a good team no matter what. We can step out and run with anybody. But you are facing other really good teams and other really good players each and every night. So you have to play 4 quarters really hard. You have to rely on defense and rebounding. The scoring is going to be a problem for this team pretty much all year long. And so you have to find other ways to win. And I'm pretty confident that Jason Kidd will find a way to do that. But through the first 3 games, it's exactly the flaws that have been exposed of this Bucks team that are going to hurt them all year long. There's nothing they can do to change what has happened, or what will happen with those flaws. They're still going to be there no matter what, and so you got to find a way around them.
All right, Phil. Thank you for the update on that. We'll catch you next Monday.
Okay, appreciate it, Jeremy. Take care, guys.
Yep, take care. All right, we'll be right back. It's Talking Fitchburg.